This is Nu-Trix. Welcome to another video. In this case, we're talking about plugin, synthesizer plugin, sampler playback plugin, and it's from UVI. It's the Emulation II Plus. And this one, we have a recreation of the Emulator I, Emulator II, Emulator III of EMU, and the Drumulator. I know that some people will say, well, why imitating an emulator, which is an old sampler? Why is sampling a sampler? Because what they did here, they actually sampled the output of the sampler and used it, and because these are sample-based. Every sound in the banks of UVI are sample-based with the own UVI synthesis on top of it. Well, the reason is that you have to go back in time and remember that the emulator was probably one of the first sampler, at least commercial success of a sampler. There was Emulator II, which was an upgrade. Now, remember, if we go back in time, this was when technology was just learning and going very fast at getting higher quality very quickly. And it meant that between Emulator I and Emulator II, there was already an upgrade in the quality of the sound, because the first one is an 8-bit sampler, second one is a 12-bit sampler, and the Emulator III is a 16-bit sampler. So the evolution was really rapid. But they're not the same quality as today. They all have their own sound because of the low res compared to today. It has a grit, it has a sound, it has a digital artifacts, if you want, to the sound that makes it so that people recognize that sound. And I think that at the time the companies were careful enough to choose and pick and create all the circuit so that these limitation of technology would be musical. And that's what made these devices popular, because they sounded still great, even if they were limited technology-wise. The Drumulator is an example that for the time it was like, oh wow, you know, it sounds like real drums, which is not the case, but still it sounds cool and musically inspiring and useful. So that's what we found here in the new package of UVI. Let's actually dive in and hear how they sound. The first thing I need to clarify with you, if you follow my YouTube channel, if you follow anything that UVI is releasing, you know that they already have a Drumulation, which is a Drumulator imitator, or recreation, if you want. There's already an Emulator I, they call it Emulation I, and there's Emulation II. They're called the same name, but they're different. If you look at the screen right now, you see that there's Drumulation, old school 80 flavor, and Drumulation. So these are the two. The two of them are recreation of the original in a different way. The interface is different. The samples are not the same. This one, the Drumulation, is part of the vintage vault. There's two sounds you can play. There's drums and snare, and when you click at the bottom here, you're moving between them. You know, you're going between the different sounds. So you get 8 different sounds, and each of them in the window here, you've got the sequencer of that sound. And if you want to play it, you can play the separate sounds. And if you play on this one, you play the sequence. Now we know that this comes from a 80s success from New Order. If you look on the other one, that's the new one. The new one, part of the Emulation II Plus. Now you got the 8 different drums, all listed together, one beside the other. And at the top here, if you click on sequence, you see the sequence of all of them. So it becomes a much more potent sequencer drum machine that you can use. Whereas this one is kind of a bizarre one where you have to switch between parts, so it's harder to create a beat. So now this becomes a real drum machine you can play. And all the notes here, they all play the same sequence everywhere. So it means that when you're going to play the keys, if you do layers, when you play, let's say, a lead, you're going to trigger the drums without changing the pitch. You're just going to trigger the drums. You're going to have the loop playing. So if you play here, that sounds like almost like a on Monday? Duran Duran, was that it? So you have these sounds. They change a lot of the way you use them. So you've got the panning, you've got the scent, you can tune it, decay, and drive. There's a filter low pass. You go up and down to change it, low pass, high pass. And you get sends. You can send to reverb and delay. If you want to access the effects, you have to go here. There's effects. You click on effects, 2 reverb and 2 delays. Okay. And they're just right there available. And then you can save this. And then there's something interesting, which is something I wanted to have in the original Drumulation that they made. In this one, when you changed sounds, you change the sequence, but there was no way to change the sequence, the pattern of the drum, without not loading another, patch here. So now what you have here, when you load any of them, you double click, you have to be sure, see there's Drumulation, but the one I'm using is inside Emulation II plus Drumulation. It's not the same. This one is the one you see here, and this one is the one you see here. I suggest you give it a new name just so people don't get mixed up, because I was running the old Drumulation and said, well, there's nothing new about it, until I figured out that it was actually somewhere else. So I thought that was the new one, and I was basically thinking there was only new sounds, and that was it. And I was wrong. So here you can just click on one of them. Let's say, I don't know, modern pop, and say, okay, this is the one I want. And then when you play here, you have the sequence playing, you get the sound playing. What you can do, you can actually lock the kit or the sequence. If you lock the sequence, and you change here, you're changing the kit. So you're exploring new sounds with the same pattern. If you click on kit, and then you can change now. So you're keeping the drum kit, but you're changing the sequence. So this is really interesting. This is a quick way to just get new ideas and play with it. And the rest of it, just you basically, the navigation for the samples to use, it's a lot more efficient. You click on it here, and then they're separated, but you can load 8 kick drums if you want. They don't have to follow the logic of bass drum, snare, hi-hat. They can be all hi-hats if you want to. So it's your choice, which was not the case in the other version of the Drumulation that they made. So you just go browse through it, then you have the sounds from the emulation, Emulator I, Emulator II, Emulator III. There was sample in them, so they sample them. There's also sound from the SP drum machine, Emulation SP. And then that's it. You can all use that. What's interesting is you can really, right away, you want to switch to the snare, you click on this one, now you're into editing the snare, and then so on and so forth. So it's very quick to use. You can actually preview them by clicking on them. So very simple and very quick. So the navigation is a huge plus compared to what it was before. And I'm going to actually exit this, so cancel. Another thing that is interesting is that here there's a multi-out. So there's a mix, stereo mix, but also a multi-out, so you can actually go into your favorite DAW and send all of these separate sounds to separate tracks and then EQ and mix accordingly. So very powerful, very much more efficient than it was in the older state. So let's just listen to a couple of sounds. If I actually go here and I unlock everything, unlock this. I'm just going to load a new one. Now people are asking about the time to load, often when we talk about UVI. In my demo that you see right now, I'm loading straight off an SSD drive that is an external drive. That's where I put all my samples. So the speed you see to load it, very efficient, very quick. Because I think that when you load one of the drum, you load all of them. They're all in it. So now you're just going through them without having to reload them. You can go right and say, okay, I'm going to have So any of them, really quick, really easy. And you can, if you want to, you can play the sound and just use your own performances to play that. And keep in mind that the way they located the snare, toms, hi-hat, and drum are using MIDI, the general MIDI protocol. So it's pretty straightforward where they should be laying out. It's not where they want to, they follow the protocol, which is, in my case, really interesting. So that's Emulator 3. This one was 16 bits. So this one now is distorting because it's part of the sound I'm using for the little song I'm working on. And I'm using the drive and the redux. So if I don't use them. Now there's different windows. If you go here very rapidly, Emulator 3 or Emulation 3, you have the edit window where you have the amplitude, the filter. There's a low pass, high pass, and bend pass. It's just more powerful, more control here on how you want to edit them. There's control about the polyphonic, the way it's going to play back, and the way the stereo effects will be done. Now remember that these are old samplers, and stereo samples were not an option at the time, so you would have to fake it. So it was like taking two samples, playing with the chorus, or phasing to create space. So its memory in the 80s cost so much that having a high quality memory or high amount of memory in a sampler was just mind-bogglingly costly. So everything was done to keep the memory low, the amount needed low. So basically you just want to click here and you select your Emulation 3, you've got bass, brass, you get all the information. And you click on it, and then you can just go and double click, and right away. And these one are very, I would say, normal. They don't have, they're 16 bits, so there's still something we hear today a lot. So it's just samples of cool sounds. That's what it is. So this is the original Emulation I plugin, and this is the new Emulation I plugin. So the original one is this one. You've got the amplitude, you've got the filter, you've got some control here, stereo, the way it's going to work. So that's the original one. So these, again, are good samples. This one, the new version, here. So you have a bunch of samples. Again, a lot of them bass, bell, brass, a lot of sounds, So you get envelope for the amplitude, filter, again, control here. If you look at the one before, less control over the filter. Well, actually, probably almost the same here. A little bit more control here over the pitch and voice. You get vibrato, tremolo, filter, LFO, so easier to go in here. Then there's this dedicated effects window. So drive, redux, which is, bit reduction. Chorus, phaser, EQ, reverb, and delay. All of this is here. Now, it wasn't possible here. Of course, you could go into effects and have it here, and you can still do that here in effects. These are the workstation effects, and this is also here, but it's part of the window, so it's easier to manage. It's saved with your preset. This here, the interface is not as friendly. You need to know what you're doing more. And this one, it's more user-friendly because you see what's available here. On top of that, you have a sequencer and or/arpeggiator. If you go on edit, you get a little window here, and you get all the steps you can edit. You can change between arpeggiator or phraser. And the phraser has up to 4 different phrases. And that's where this is really interesting, because it has been super interesting to follow UVI and see how they use this. The kind of instant gratification you can use with this, you can look at this as being, you've got the drum machine, of course, but if you use this as you've got a sequencer, part of your synthesizer, you can play, you can have these different phrases here, like a bass line, and then turn it on here. I don't hear it too much. It's not that loud. So it's easy to just start a song with these phrases. And what's interesting, and it's good for all of the samplers that comes with Emulation, the Emulation II Plus. Look at the top here. Play these notes. It's going to tell you the chords that you're playing off. So it gives you information. And for me, which is, I didn't learn my music theory, and I play by ear. So it's interesting to actually learn by looking at this. And here there's something also useful. You get a scale quantizer. If you click on this, it's always going to play to a scale that is possible. So it's going to fix my errors, and it's going to sound musical. So it's very interesting because it helps me a lot. So that's a hidden feature in it. It goes beyond the sound. It's actually the playability of the Emulation I, II, and III here because of these things. That's really, for me, a big plus. The rest of it is basically finding the sound that you want. You hear that looping, but that's part of the sound of these original samplers. They were limited in the amount of RAM, so you hear that loop. So these are the samples. So these are sometimes banks of sound that were known. Let's actually, there's orchestral strings. So all of these sounds, there's samples of actual sounds. There are samples from percussive sounds, instrumental sounds, acoustic instruments, weird stuff. There's effects. There's a lot of sounds here, which is really interesting. But where this actually shines the most is when you use them in the multi-mode, and that's this thing. In the multi, actually go click on it, and you go into multi-mode, and then you've got a bunch of multi-mode. So the multi-mode is actually, I'm going to close this. You have 4 of them, plus the drum. So you get the drum, A, first instrument, B, second instrument, C, third instrument, D, fourth instrument, and effects. Now look at D here. It's really using this section here. So it's split. It's using that section, whereas C, B, A, and D, and drum are using that section. So again, you've got all the editing window and facility of the sequence here. If you want for this one, you can create your sequence. The A still can go in here and go into the edit of the sequence for this one because it's actually using it. If I go solo on this one, this one also has the sequence. This one also has a sequence. And the last one has a sequence, but the last one is in a section on the keyboard. It's not triggering everything else. Let's try another one. see how this is really fun. Because I'm playing one note and I'm keeping it. If I go up, so it's a little bit like playing in Intelligent Arranger, which is not. I find it really inspiring to use this. It's just, you get ideas and say, okay, I can use this. I can start with that. I can get creative with this. And there's also the effects section. The reverb, delay mostly for the drums, and the others for the other effects. So it's just like a cool way to just get inspired and start a song. Of course, they have stuff that is just new for the fun. And there's stuff from the 80s. I mean, you got stuff here, you're gonna know what these are. So it's easy for somebody who wants to do cover to start with this. Or just get inspired by the idea of I can do something that have the sound of it and then create something new with it. You have the sound of these. You gotta know this one. It's just cool. It's just the fun. But there's a lot of them. I'm just in the 80s section. Let's say Dark Wave. See what this is. Again, pretty cool. By themselves, you just get these cool sounds with the grit and the sound of the emulators, depending on the model you have. The Drumulation has the capacity of being a full-fledged sequencer, a beatbox, drum machine with all the controls that you expect with the multiple outs. And this combination of everything is just a cool, it's like, almost think of it as being an external hardware device that you play, you sync with your song, and then you build it. It's like I would be playing something off here, but it's in my computer, and it plays 4 different tracks, plus a drum machine, and all of this can be synced to my song. So I find it's really interesting, the way to approach this. Man, I know I might be a pain for this, but I would love to see these in my iPad. I would love to do this with my iPad. I understand that one of the limits is the space on the hard drive, but now that the iPads can actually have a hard drive connected to it and read them off the hard drive, that'd be so cool to have this on the Mac and on the iPad, because I'm doing a lot of my songs and I move them because I'm using Zenbeats a lot. I'm moving them between Mac and iPad, and that'd be great because now we'd be able to use it in the two places. Well, that's it. Great job again, UVI. I like what you're doing. Keep it up. And now, if you guys are interested, go test it, watch it, listen to the sounds. And if you have any questions and comments, put them below. See you soon. Stay safe and make more music. Cheers.